Hello? Hello? All right, everybody, we're going to get started. If you want to grab a seat, grab a beer, check the score of the game before you sit down. What is the score? Anybody know?
We're up.
Oh, man. Sports ball. Come on. It's the Warriors. You can sit in the VIP lounge down front. Thanks, everybody, for coming by Practice Fusion. If you don't know, we're an Ember shop. We're always looking for talent. A lot of those talented folks are sitting down here in the front if you want to meet them. They'll be doing some speed talks later on, talking about some of the things that we're working on. We're going to kick it off today with Ben Holmes, who works at Zesty. And he's going to talk a little bit about a topic that I thoroughly enjoy is WebSockets. All right, Ben.
Hey guys, I want to say thank you first of all to Practice Fusion for hosting. They're doing a great job here. Is this anybody's first time San Francisco Ember meetup? Yeah, got a few. Cool. Yeah, it's my first time last month, so I've been really impressed so far with the group. We've got the Wicked Ember conference happening today, kicking off. Don't you wish you were there? And I think the thing that we're really missing tonight is the sports ball, right? We're saying so. Yeah, I'm really impressed with the turnout, all things considered. I work for a company called Zesty, as we said. We're trying to make a big impact on the way that people eat. We do healthy, delicious food for a lot of the companies, startups in San Francisco. Sorry if this is anybody in the audience. We're growing really fast. We can't really make this out. I mean, this cupboard is just overflowing. Everything in the office is just overflowing. Crazy busy these days. We use Ember. We love Ember. We're currently trying to convert as much as we can to use Ember because it's so good. A lot of people in the office don't know what Ember is. I've found my figurine gets stolen. Came to work one day with this on my keyboard. I thought that was cute. So some of the ways we're using Ember at Zesty. This is one of the client-facing apps. It gives people an idea of what they're eating on a certain day. Gives them an opportunity to see allergy information, feedback. You know, the Ember's been really great for trying to have a really snappy interface with our back-end servers and just writing to it. We handle a lot of live information, so it's really important that we can stay up to date on what's happening at a given time. In particular, this is one of the areas where WebSockets has been really useful for us. If we've got this website open and being able to pick up new information as it comes in from the field. And this is the app that's really motivated a lot of this talk. It's changed some of the way that I work personally with Ember and the way we work as a team in coordinating between front end and back end. The idea here is that we're trying to put together very quickly an interface for performing a certain task where we're assisting the AI with a human, and we're trying to get this thing out the door as soon as possible, but we don't have an API together. So we're mocking out this setup using Ember CLI Mirage, and then the back-end developer and the front-end developer work in tandem to get this stuff together. And I think somebody used the analogy of building a bridge from two sides of the bank and hoping that they meet up in the middle, but we'll see if that actually happens. So yeah, I'm talking about mocking WebSockets. I'm really talking generally about mocking web requests as well. I think we'll start with some motivation, and then talk about how we can go about mocking regular web requests, and then go on to talking about mocking WebSockets requests in particular. So first of all, motivation. As Ember developers, a lot of what we really care about is the Ember app. But you might have all sorts of other things to get your Ember app up and running, especially if you're testing against some like in-house API. We have a lot of Ember apps at Zesty, and sometimes maybe a bug comes up in one app, and then you have to go in and make sure that all of your dev environment is up and running, and you've downloaded the right version of this database, and oh god, the data that I've got there is out of date now. So that's a big problem, and really all you just want to be focusing on here is the Ember app. And sometimes, like I said, with the situation there we had with the third one where we were trying to rapidly prototype, you don't even necessarily have this API available to test against. So the idea here is that if we mock all of the web requests that the Ember app is required to make, then we can start not having to deal with any of this stuff and having this isolated environment where we just need to worry about the Ember. So I think one of the things I like about Ember is that it's given me the opportunity to experiment with the way that I develop. And traditionally, mocking has a bit of a bad name. And really the way that you use it traditionally is in keeping your unit tests isolated. So this is great in the sense that you have this isolation happening, which means that the tests in themselves can run faster. They're guaranteed to be reproducible, and if you've got a particular edge case that you're trying to exhibit, it's really easy to do that. But the disadvantage that we have here is that the tests that you've created, if you've used mocks to put those tests together, they can be really brittle, because if the way that you're interacting with the mock has changed the same, but stayed the same way, but if the thing that you're mocking has changed, then your test is still going to pass, even though your application is fundamentally broken. So you have this maintenance overhead of trying to keep your mocks up to date as the applications change. It's not always immediately apparent when something's going wrong. So that said about mocks, the thing that we're doing here is slightly different, that we're building up this wall around everything that Ember's doing, particularly with just mocking out all the web requests. So everything that's happening inside Ember, all of the relationships that are happening between specific units inside Ember, that is still essentially end-to-end. Ideally, if you've got a setup like this, you should be able to take the wall down and still test it against a live instance. But you don't want that live instance to be getting in your way when you don't want it to. The other thing I should say is fixture data. Yeah, you can update it fairly easily, but it can get really big. It's like this is as opposed to the problems that you get with mocking, where you've still got these mocks that behave previously. And in this case, you could just delete all of your fixture data. In principle, run it against the live server, and then you've got fresh fixture data there, in the same way as if you had your local development environment, you download a new copy of data from production environment or something like that. You've got a similar setup here. So this is, don't be scared when we're saying mocks here. It's not like Rails land where mocks are the enemy. So first of all, mocking web requests. I'm going to touch on a library called Pretender. It's put together by Trek Wawaki. There's a couple of different libraries that you could turn to. There's Mockjax. You might have seen Xenon was in the last talk. There's a fantastic presentation about Xenon. That will let you do, besides mocking and stubbing in your own libraries, it will let you stub web requests. That's really great. I'm going to talk about Pretender because it's very popular in the Ember community. And what Pretender lets you do is you set up a fake server that you want to talk to, configure that in a very low-level way, and then web requests that you make within your Ember app, when they try and call out to the regular server, it gets intercepted and speaks to the server that you set up. So as an example, here is a Pretender server we're configuring to get from a list from a songs endpoint. We're specifying that we're using a get method. We're returning a 200 status here, and that the content type is JavaScript. This is a very kind of low-level way of playing with things, but it's really. I mean, we can go into more detail here. If you're like maintaining a list of example photos here, you could get as well as just say the index route. You've got the show route here, and then this example at the bottom is just showing if you do this get request, this is you just do it in the standard way, and you'll get intercepted by the server that we've set up at the top here. So the way that it does this is it hijacks the XML HTTP request object in the browser there. So if you can go into the source code for Pretender, it's not particularly big, and look into how it works. It's very interesting. One of the cool things that it does is it gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of how you define your setup. You can do things like specify that certain requests should get intercepted and other requests should pass through and behave with the API in the standard way. So that's great. If you're looking for examples of how Pretender can get used, Stefan Penner has the Ember Jobs website as open source. You can have a look through some of the tests that are associated with that. It's using here, you can see we got the ES7 stuff here that's making the code look really a lot nicer for some of the async methods that we've got. So that's really staying ahead of the curve. I thought that was a good example. But you can see there the server is being set up, and this is just using Pretender. So that's basic introduction to Pretender there. So Pretender is just a regular JavaScript library. There's nothing specific to Ember there per se, besides the fact that it's popular with Ember community. So Sam Selikoff has put together an Ember add-on called Ember CLI Mirage for doing this kind of thing. It's essentially a very nice wrapper for using Pretender. It's got a new little website, but I don't think it really makes it very clear from the front page what it does. The really cool thing about Ember CLI Mirage, as opposed to other techniques you might use, or just using Pretender on its own, is that you set up this Mirage folder for your entire app, and then you have the same environment for doing your development and for doing your testing. So this has been a big boon for me, because having that fixture data there in my dev environment and then being able to test against it has helped me from a maintenance point of view, and it kind of has this single source of truth of here in this Mirage folder I've got everything managed that I'm worrying about in terms of what the data looks like that I'm mocking. And how you put that data together is relatively up to you. You get the choice of using fixtures or factories. The difference there being that the fixtures are the kind of the very raw data that it will inject. When you make that web request, it will give you just a bunch of JSON. Or with the factories, you're very much looking at the instantiated Ember model objects there. So there's different approaches. I think coming from the Rails community, you see favoring certain ones in different situations, but I think it's for you to make the judgment call on what you prefer. I find with fixtures, they're great when you start with, but as your app grows, it can really very quickly become unmanageable. And the way that Ember CLI Mirage is leaning at the moment is to work more with factories anyway. So the other thing to mention is there's a library called Factory Guy. You might be familiar with Factory Girl from the Rails community. Factory Guy is for doing factories in this setup. So that's something definitely worth checking out. The big thing, and it's largely why I'm giving this presentation in the first place, is the thing of using Ember CLI Mirage and having that unified test and dev environment is it's really changed the way that we're working at the moment in terms of defining APIs. So making a pull request against the Mirage folder in the app to discuss, okay, we're like going to propose that the API does something different here. That's been really good as like a point of discussion and workflow and just a thing of describing the API when, say normally we might not have the time or the inclination to actually rigorously document our APIs. So when you do your Ember install, Ember CLI Mirage, you get this setup here. You get some factories, some fixtures. If you're using factories, you get the opportunity to set up scenarios. So in certain scenarios, you might be exhibiting certain edge case behavior. You've got this default scenario that kicks in by default. The way you configure the server, you'll see is a lot less verbose than we had with Pretender there. So you're just saying, I want to be able to form a GET request against assignments ID, get a specific assignment out of there. And these are like shorthand methods for doing the kind of standard things you'd be expecting. So I think the benefit that we're getting here is that Ember CLI Mirage is in the same way that Ember's opinionated, we're getting that opinionation in our mocking library here. So just to quickly show you the difference here with having the factories and the fixtures. This is a factory here. We see we've got this is just a straight up JavaScript object here, and we're extending Mirage Factory here. I again recommend just looking through some of the source code. It's not that complicated at all. Fixture data. I think this is much easier to set up in the sense that you can just copy and paste the stuff that comes through from the server. Part of what I'm trying to put together at the moment is a thing that captures where you say, for instance, where you don't have fixture data already, it will make the API call against the server and just put that in and save it in a file so that future calls, in the same vein as using something like VCR, that would be tremendously helpful. So it'd be good if somebody could put that together. The big thing to notice here is that deep down, Ember CLI Mirage is just using Pretender. It's just a very convenient way of defining all of these different things that you would have done in a long form by hand. And even things like noticing that your app is in a production environment, so don't do the mockings. Like it's more like how you'd expect it to just work. So things to look out for. Sam's currently working on how you can set up relationships between models. And fundamentally, the thing that Ember CLI Mirage is doing is instead of having your own server to maintain that database state, it maintains the database state for you. So giving it some kind of more information about how relationships work between different models is something that he's focusing on. One thing to notice with Ember CLI Mirage is that when you start using it, it will block all of your requests, and you can't selectively start passing things through like you get with Pretender. So again, that's something, it just needs doing at some point. Somebody please do it. And then, like I say, auto-populating fixture data would be lovely. So that was how we can look at mocking just a regular web request like we used to. And WebSockets had an interesting flavor to the mix. I'm not going to introduce WebSockets to you guys. You know what it is. The difference in the way that it's used is that we're trying to push information to the client and keep clients in sync and put together chat demos. I actually originally had a chat demo for today. You'll be pleased to know I'm not showing it to you. One of the things to bear in mind when we're talking about mocking WebSockets is that whilst we do have native libraries and a fairly well agreed upon API for defining this stuff, we also have socket IO to worry about here. So that's a consideration. It's ultimately doing the same stuff, but the way you interact with it in your application code is different. And then honorable mention to Firebase. They also gave a fantastic talk last week, and they've been helping Zesty out a lot. The map app that you saw there, we've actually now moved from WebSockets to Firebase. So that's been an interesting experience, to say the least. I'm going to quickly show you the demo that I'm doing instead of a chat demo, given that we have got the big ball game or whatever tonight. I put together a WebSocket example that will show us live scores from the game. So that's really cool. Sorry if anybody is trying to avoid it. So yeah, this isn't so cool. Oh, but we're doing okay now. Just a little late, yeah. This is, you know, a bit of a slow connection maybe, I don't know. So, 43, should we? What was that, 43? Let's call it 43 to 45, how about that? So, just to show you very quickly how this works. There we are, that's a bit better. So I've got this using Socket.io, and the code is pretty simple. Let's start with the bottom bit. So we say that when we receive a web connection, every 2 seconds we're going to ask MBA for what the latest score is, and then send it to the client. So this actually isn't live scores at all. It's, you know, we're polling for it, and yeah, of course, you know, we've got a bit of logic here to decide, you know, every now and again somebody scores. So this is, you know, super simple stuff here. And this, I think the important thing to notice here is that it's not this, you know, request response cycle that we have normally. We're just sat here and we're receiving new data as it comes. So from a mocking point of view, this is interesting, right? We're not saying server sit here and you know, wait for things to come in. We're actually pushing stuff to the client. So it's a slightly different way of thinking about things. So in the same way as we had Pretender for doing regular web requests, we have this library here. Again, another just generic JavaScript library. There's nothing Ember specific here. This is put together by Travis Hoover, and it's for mocking WebSocket requests. Sam Sadikoff, the guy who put together Ember CLI Mirage, I actually met Travis and Sam at EmberConf this year. It was about the point where I started getting excited about Ember and open source again, you know, all of this stuff. So I reached out to Sam a couple of months ago when I'd been doing some work on Ember CLI Mirage, and he said, I said, let me know if there's anything that you'd like help with, and he said, if we can get this Mocksocket library working with Socket.io, it'd be really good to integrate that with Ember CLI Mirage. So that's kind of the starting point of this entire talk. I just sent out this tweet into the ether, and now here I am. I was actually originally planning to have all of this work done by now, but I was also planning to give this talk next month, so, you know, forgive me. So the way Mocksocket works is very similar to the way Pretender works. What we do is define a mock server and configure it to you know, work in a certain way. And then we hijack the client, just like Pretender did, hijacking. In this case, the client might be Socket.io, it might be just the native library here. So the way we configure this, slightly different looking. Oh, sorry. This should look very reminiscent of the way that you define a server for setting up a WebSocket server, so like the npm, the standard library there for doing that. Here we're saying when we receive a message, we send a message back that says hello. And the way that you do the hijacking, Pretender does it for you behind the scenes, but here we do it explicitly. So that's like one of the differences to notice. And in particular, if we're doing socket IO, then we have a slightly different interface there. But that's the way we do this hijacking. I'm going to try and do some live coding to do this hijacking with the live scores. So we'll see how that goes. Part of the thing to mention here is it's not a coincidence that this looks like the way that you define WebSockets typically. We're trying to, there's a lot of mimicry happening here. We're trying to mimic the client API so that your app doesn't notice when you've substituted it in. And similarly, when you configure your server, you want your configuration for the mock server to look very similar to your regular server configuration. So, yeah, so we've got our app here, and then this is the code for the actual server itself. So here we've got an Express server that's just doing this stuff. The actual Ember app itself that I'm running, it's the same directory here. I've got a service that's looking out for the score. So this handles the like socket IO part of setting up that connection. And can everybody read that okay? Is that all good? And then it listens for an update to the score. And then I have a component there that's set up to register that callback when it gets put on the page. So when I get a score, let's actually put that out on that score. So I've got a component there for the Golden State Warriors and one for the Cavaliers there. So what I'm going to start by doing is by saying, let's get a new initializer here called Mocksocket. That's not so good. I've been warned about the perils of live coding. Somebody told me to record a video in advance of me doing it, just in case. I didn't do that. So let's put these side by side, actually, because we'll get that library loading happening when we start making changes. So let's remind ourselves of what that code was. I don't exactly remember it. We've got window.io to do that hijacking. If I wasn't using socket.io, it would look slightly different there. But that's that. Now, if I save this, we're going to start intercepting the WebSockets requests. So there's no scores coming through at the moment. So the next thing to do, essentially, is to define a server. So I'm going to say, give me a new mock server. And we'll just specify the place where the server lives, where we're intercepting the request to. So then for that mock server, I want to say, when I get a connection, let's do some stuff. So what's really nice here is that because we've tried to make the configuration of the server reflect the way that you configure the server normally, I can just take the code that I had for my server and substitute that in directly. So let's just do that now. So if I pop this in, I'm not going to ask for an updated score because I'm pretty sure there's some people who really don't want to hear what the score is at the moment. I don't know. Is there anybody going to watch it later? Nope. Okay. So So I'm literally just going to pop this all in here and hope for the best. The thing here is that we've not got I/O now. We've got this mock server. So that's how that's going to work. And in principle, that's all we need to do. So now we're intercepting the request that we have to the server, and we're behaving as if we were a WebSocket server. One thing to bear in mind here is that this socket I/O here and this mock server object, we haven't hooked them up in any particular way here. It just maintains a kind of global state. So that's just something to be wary of. The other thing to mention is that I'm not very happy with the way the score's looking. So I might just tweak it a little bit in our favor and see how that goes. Yeah, okay, so we can leave that running and see how the Warriors do at the end of the game. Yeah, so for Mocksocket, things to look out for. Like I say, the socket I/O connections, they're almost done. And Travis is looking to integrate it with the Ember add-on for WebSockets that he maintains. So that's something to look out for. And then so the other piece of this is actually taking Mocksocket and integrating it into Ember CLI Mirage so that we can use Ember CLI Mirage with WebSockets as well. This is also work in progress, but the general idea is in the same way as we had Pretender and we were using it and we were using Mirage to make that experience a lot nicer and a lot more applicable to our workflows in Ember. We're going to have a similar setup. So if we're familiar with using Mirage already and we've got factory data set up, having an event like a new bit of file progress coming through will be really easy to define here as an event here. So if we just stick it in an events folder or something like that, this is the API that we're envisaging. And then when you're setting up your scenario, you can say, I want to enqueue certain events so that when I'm interacting with the server, I start getting this stuff through. So that's a much kind of nicer high-level interface than having to say, okay, ember.run later, or even worse, what I was doing where I had a set interval and I just set this code to run arbitrarily. That, not so nice. So we talked about the motivation for doing mocking for web requests and WebSockets and touched on how you can start using these yourself. I want to just very briefly talk about contributing in the Ember community. It's something that when I first started working with Ember, it's something I wanted to do, and especially after getting all hyped up and excited at EmberConf, I didn't really know where to start. Somebody at EmberConf suggested I read this article. I strongly recommend you read it if you're also not entirely sure where to go from here. Generally speaking, my advice is get on Twitter. If you don't use Twitter already, I feel like it's the messaging portion of GitHub. Everybody who's relevant is using Twitter relevantly. Start using Canary in your production apps. It's scary, I know, but you'll find, I don't know, I've actually not found the path to upgrading Ember to be particularly difficult. I'm actually really looking forward to, we've got a lightning talk about that coming up, so I'm looking to see some of the advice that we've got about keeping Ember up to date, but having Canary there has actually been surprisingly easy. And from a contributing point of view, it means that you're going to help the community raise issues and fix bugs when you see them come in and break your local copies. So definitely check out Canary and follow small projects on GitHub. A surprising amount of people will just submit issues. They're like, oh, this is broken, but not actually submit a fix for it. So if you see the issue come in, you can dive in and be like, hey, I'm goody two shoes here, fixing your stuff for you. And offer to help people if that's what you want to do. Reach out to people on Twitter. The Ember community is fantastically kind and thankful when you do. Just quick, this month we've been seeing, follow Igor Terzic. He's been asking for contributions here. We've had Eric Brin. I think this is yesterday. Eric, are you here? Do we have an Eric in there? We have an Eric in the house. Yeah, so he's calling out for help. Somebody help him. And yeah, everybody's just super grateful. It's really warm and fuzzy feelings all around. Thanks to Practice Fusion for hosting, Ember-SF for doing this. Lee and Kate really just everything down to a fine art with this. It's amazing. And thank you for help from these guys putting my talk together. It's been really useful. And of course, we're hiring Ember devs. Come up some stuff with us. Yeah. Any questions? Yes. Right. So the question was, how are we using WebSockets in our Ember apps? Yeah. Like, how do you actually stick it into the? Is it through an adapter? Is it through a service? Is it in the controller? Right. I don't know what the standard way of doing this is. If there's like an agreed upon method, I've always just taped stuff together and hope for the best. How I have done in the past is I have some kind of service there that is responsible for maintaining my WebSocket connections. And then if you're registering things that respond to events from those WebSockets, you do it with that service. So the services set up, having like services and components, it's a really nice relationship there that I tend to try and use as much as I can. One way that you will see if you've played around with Emberfire that we saw last month is that Emberfire sets up an adapter. So specifically hooking in the way that they work with WebSockets with Ember data. So that's kind of a closer, very specific way of doing it. If you're looking for like a more, general way of doing it, services and components, I think is the way to do it. Any other questions? Yeah. 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 Yeah, sure. I don't think you should be, if you're doing mocking, I'd say don't do that. Don't do that in isolation. In the same way as you wouldn't just write tons of unit tests and then never do anything else. You've got all these individual components. Just having a couple of acceptance tests around, that's really useful. The other thing to mention is something like Ember CLI Mirage. If you specify, I don't know if you've seen Ember CLI, you've got this proxy feature you can use. If you pass in a proxy parameter when you start up the server, it'll start sending it to wherever you're sending it. So Mirage will pick that up and stop intercepting. So if I've got my local API at a certain port, I can pass that into this proxy thing, and then I'm running everything against live data. And there, if I'm just testing it myself, it will very quickly become apparent if my mocks have become out of date because everything will start breaking. It's not a very good way to test, but Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, I think this is absolutely relevant here, and this is another area where I think it'd be really great to see some activity. My plan is when I finally put together the stuff for mocking WebSockets with Ember CLI Mirage, I think there's a lot of potential because fundamentally the objects that you're working with in Mirage are like JSON blobs or actual like JavaScript objects. It fits in very well with the pattern that you typically work with for Emberfire and Firebase. So there is a library out there called Mock Firebase. I believe the Emberfire app has just been set up to start working with that for their own test suite. I know the guy that runs the London Ember group is Jamie White. I think he's written some articles about mocking Firebase, and personally, what I really want to do is to put mock Firebase into Ember CLI Mirage in exactly the same way as we'd get Mocksocket in there, and it's just essentially just another adapter that you just drop in and it starts mocking that stuff out. So yeah, absolutely, I think this is very relevant. Any other questions? Cool. Excellent. All right, well, thank you very much.